Does Persona 4 need a remake? Of course it does. I mean, look at it. It's old. Alright. Let me explain. Ever since Persona 3 Reload's release, a lot of the community has been insanely impressed with how well it turned out. Whether or not you think this remake is faithful or better than the original is very up to debate. However, what matters is that the fact that they were even able to make one in this scale is insane. This did bring up an interesting question, however. What are we gonna do with Persona 4? It's the only other game that used the same engine as P3, so it's fair to say that it's deserving of a remake, isn't it? Well, here's where things get complicated. Despite many, and I mean many people being in support of Reload, a lot of those same people have said 4 doesn't need one. Being one of the biggest Persona 4 fans in existence, I just thought this was silly hate for the game. While P4 has some diehard fans, there's just as many willing to say it's not that good. But surprisingly, a good amount of people actually pointed out some solid arguments. As a result, this created a new side of the discussion, giving their own thoughts for why P4 should get a remake. As you can tell, this just became an endless, but also very fascinating debate in the fandom. One that still gets a lot of attention post-Reload, so that's why we're here. I originally wasn't gonna make this an actual production so soon, but after doing a quick poll on the channel, a lot of you guys have expressed your passion towards this topic, and my god, never have I seen a poll of ours do this well. Also, it just gives me an excuse to talk about P4 again, so might as well, right? So as a fun discussion, I'll go over my thoughts on the debate, some of the points listed for this production, and what a potential remake could actually look like. This is going to be a very fun project, so be sure to grab your favorite resave plush and enjoy this production. These are our takes on a Persona 4 remake. Before we start, I just want to say that if you're enjoying our productions or you just want to see more Persona related stuff from us, be sure to press that subscribe button. While you're at it, be sure to check out our Patreon to further help the channel. Let me just say that I am in fact very in support of a Persona 4 remake. For those unaware, P4 is within my top 3 Persona games of all time. I love the story, the characters, the music, just about everything. By this logic, I'm more than happy to just see a potential remake if it means it's gonna be back in the spotlight. However, there are legitimate reasons I want to see this remake happen other than just because. You gotta keep in mind that while Persona 4 has aged surprisingly well for what is basically a PS2 game, that's not going to be the same for everybody else. Games have new standards as technology advances, new mechanics, quality of life changes, animations. All of these are things that have expectations and become more of a critique when it comes to our standards. That's, again, a big reason I don't like reviewing a lot of games before the GameCube era. I have made exceptions, of course, but a lot of my thoughts on a game come from how I experience it today, and that's unfortunately how a lot of people go about them too. If I had a friend ask me which Persona game should they start with, I would just say go with Persona 3 Reload. While it's not my favorite Persona game, it just makes more sense for a newcomer to try it out. It's the best playing and also best looking, so I might as well just hand it to them. This doesn't apply for when someone asks for recommendations either. Before Reload even existed, I've been told many times from other people that they won't play anything that wasn't Persona 5 for the exact same reason. Things like dungeon designs, character models, UI can heavily be enhanced, making it for pretty much the perfect experience, and I'd even say how this game could have turned out if it wasn't for the technical limitations of the time. Do keep in mind that I'm not saying this game plays poorly or is outdated, not at all. However, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't the most jarring to go back to after playing Persona 5 or Reload. I'll go over what kind of changes I would make in this potential remake, but before we do, why not take a look at some of the reasons why it shouldn't? After going through the comments of the poll we made, there's definitely been quite a unique consensus. Fans don't outright despite the idea of a remake, rather, they just don't see it as a smart move at the moment. Around 80% of them claim the reasoning behind it is because of Persona 1 and 2. This is completely valid. I said it before in our Persona Games on Dead Consoles production, but to give a brief recap, P1 and P2 absolutely need a new coat of paint. Plus, these games aren't getting as much praise compared to P3 to P5. It just makes sense for Atlus to prioritize these games first. I will say, however, among all the comments we received, this one in particular really stood out for me. To put it simply, the idea is that Persona 3 was an experiment to see how well the new structure of the formula could work. Now that we've seen what worked and what didn't, Atlus was able to polish it and soon make it the franchise it's known for today. Honestly speaking, speaking, that's probably one of the best justifications for why Reload even should exist. Let's admit it, Persona 3 is not a perfect game in the gameplay department. If you thought going from 5 to 4 was already jarring enough, you do not want to imagine how much harder it was for 3. I did not enjoy P3, and a big reason of it was because of the gameplay. You can tell, however, it was a very ambitious plan, so it's kind of a miracle it was able to work out this well. With Reload, I really can't find much reason to say the game's overall bad. All of my criticisms are more so just personal preferences to what I like to see in a Persona game. What matters in the end is at the very least, Persona 4 Golden is still a very solid game. It definitely still holds up well, and just goes to show how passionate the fandom really is for this game. And I will still forever love it for what it is. But that's not fun. Plus, if there's legitimate demand for it, why don't we take a look at how a Persona 4 remake would even work? Well, it's quite easy. Reload already gave us a pretty good idea of the things Atlus is capable of, but why not go further? Unlike that game where it did its best to remain as faithful to the source material, I want Atlus to really try and be as groundbreaking with this remake that it can put Golden to the dust. For this, however, we need to think big. So first things first, we need unique dungeon designs. Not to the insane level P5R, but rather more visual variety and laid back. You're not really going through vents and jumping out of windows like a badass, but rather using critical thinking and solving unique puzzles. Let me explain. The TV world is essentially a collective consciousness of the public, with the victims' different dungeons behaving as to what they repress from that audience, but in a twisted and dramatized way. Use this to its fullest. Add gimmicks, puzzles, and overall just new areas that can correlate with that dungeon you're in. I want to know more about this TV world. The game doesn't really do the best job, it's mostly vague about how it exactly works, so the best way to fix that is through showing us the more complex details. What kind of rooms does Yukiko's castle have that we've never seen before? Is there a full dungeon of jail cells? Rooms full of treasures? Secrets she may be hiding from us? These sorts of things are created as a result of, say, rumors or ideas that people may have of the victims. This can not only just work for the aesthetics of a dungeon, but also the mechanics of each one, with puzzles and obstacles working as the doubts or denial people have for said victims. This will not only make the dungeons more unique in their own way, they'll also become more memorable to players. But it's not just the dungeons or the TV world that you can modify. Let's talk about the story. Oh, don't worry, it'll be the same as Golden, but absolutely increase the production values. Add some genuine action or cutscenes of how the shadow versions of our cast transform to their true forms. The thought of that is absolutely amazing, and you cannot tell me otherwise. I'd also say, maybe tone down the personalities of some of the characters. Looking at you, Yosuke. I used to tolerate Yosuke, but now seeing him on a second playthrough for this production, yeah, I can see why a lot of people hate him. But that's not too big of a deal. There is something I will make bigger changes to, however, but we'll get to that in a moment. Because let's talk about graphics. This will be a bit of a hot take, but I kinda want Persona 4 to look more like 5 in a way. Well, yes, Reload is insanely impressive. I feel like for a game like Persona 4, I want it to be graphically impressive in a different way. I want this game's art style to be very vibrant and colorful. I mean, come on, when you give me a game with this kind of UI and opening, I'm expecting the most stylish game imaginable. Which reminds me, don't change the UI. One thing I love about Golden specifically is how gorgeous the menus are. Even more than 5's, honestly. I don't know what it is, but there's something about that 60s pop art style with the CRT designs that just... damn, it's so good. Make it just an absolute joy to see every time you open the menu, with the different icons popping in and out, some stars sparkling every now and then. Look, just watch the Persona 4 Golden opening and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Lastly, and probably one of the biggest changes I'd like to make, integrate much more smoothly Marie's dungeon. As many of you know, I am not the biggest fan of it, and while I doubt they'd make any changes to it, I feel like there are some ways they can better integrate it. I'd like for her dungeon and arc to be focused more in the months of January and February. Think of it in the likes of Persona 5 Royal was building towards Maruki's palace. You explore a bit of the dungeon over the first couple of days, and once you figure out the reason for its existence and all the god stuff Maria is all about, that's when slowly but surely you start trying to find the end to it before a deadline. One thing I didn't like about this part of the game was the fact that I pretty much had to do it all in one day. I know it has its own reasoning in the story and all that, but I definitely feel like you can better implement this in a much smoother way. That or simply make it a DLC campaign. Like I said, this whole arc included in Golden was still confusing to me, so anything that better implements this will be a blessing. And that's about it. The whole topic of whether or not Persona 4 will actually get a remake has been very interesting. What initially started and almost felt like a topic that would be dismissed has surprisingly developed significantly. Seriously, we have people over here making mock-ups of what they'd like to see and hear, some of which are absolutely amazing work. Like I said before, I was in full support for this to happen since the beginning. One of my favorite reviews I made for Personathon was for P4, and I still stand by that. Persona 4 is a game that means so much for me. It may not be the first game I played in this franchise, but it definitely is the one that made me a true Persona fan. Whatever happens for this future project, all I can say is, I wish it and Atlas the best of luck. I'm more than confident and trust them with this kind of task. But guys, I'm pretty sure we can all agree what game needs a remake the most. Persona 5. I mean, look at it. It's old.